Hi everyone, I'm Emma, and you're on the Stories by Emma channel. Let's dive into some amazing stories. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you. The alley behind Main Street. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the small, quiet town. The once bustling streets of Riverbend felt suffocatingly empty. Taylor, a local delivery driver, knew the shortcuts by heart, but there was one alley he always avoided. It was a narrow passage behind the old hardware store, littered with forgotten memories, graffiti, and an unsettling silence that crawled under your skin. Everyone in town spoke about it in hushed tones, but no one could ever explain why. Taylor's friends, Chris and Jasmine, teased him relentlessly about his fear of the alley. "Come on, man, it's just a shortcut. Don't be a baby," Chris would say with a smirk. Jasmine would nod, but there was always something in her eyes, a flicker of hesitation. Despite the mockery, Taylor stuck to his route, until one night when an unexpected detour left him with no choice. A road closure forced him to face the path he dreaded most. The night was unusually cold for September, and Taylor's breath came out in wisps as he turned down the dimly lit alley. His truck's headlights barely cut through the thick darkness, illuminating only the decaying brick walls and piles of discarded trash. Every sound seemed amplified: the crunch of gravel under his boots, the faint whisper of wind weaving through the narrow gap. Though nothing moved in sight, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Halfway through, Taylor's truck suddenly stalled. The engine sputtered before going silent, leaving him stranded. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried the ignition again, but the truck refused to start. A thick, oppressive silence followed, and then he heard it. A soft rustling behind him. He spun around, eyes darting, but there was nothing there. His mind raced, reminding himself that fear was just playing tricks on him, but deep down he knew something was wrong. Taylor grabbed his flashlight, stepping out into the chilled night air. As the beam of light swept over the alley, he saw what looked like a figure dart out of sight, disappearing into the shadows. His skin prickled with unease, and a wave of nausea hit him. He shouted into the void, "Who's there?" His voice echoed back, distorted and mocking, as if the alley itself was alive, breathing in his fear. No response came, only the suffocating silence. Determined to get the truck started, Taylor returned to the driver's seat. That's when he noticed something strange. A note, crumpled and smeared with dirt, lying on the passenger seat. He hadn't seen it before. With shaky hands, he unfolded the paper. In smeared ink it read, "You're not alone. We never left." Taylor's stomach twisted, his hands trembling as he looked around the dark alley. The words echoed in his mind, sending chills down his spine. Panic set in. He fumbled with his phone, trying to call Chris, but the screen froze, unresponsive. Taylor cursed under his breath, slamming the phone down. Just as he looked up, his headlights flickered back on. In the fleeting light, he caught a glimpse of someone, standing at the far end of the alley. The figure was still, almost blending into the shadows. It felt as if it was watching him, waiting. Taylor's breath quickened, but he couldn't move. Gathering what little courage he had left, Taylor revved the engine again. This time it roared to life. Without a second thought, he sped out of the alley, the figure disappearing in his rearview mirror. But the sense of unease didn't leave. It followed him home, clinging to him like a shadow. That night he barely slept, plagued by the note's words. "We never left." They echoed in his dreams, and by morning, he was convinced something had followed him out of that alley. Over the next few days, strange things began happening. Lights flickered in his apartment, and he heard faint knocks at his door in the dead of night, though no one was ever there. Chris and Jasmine laughed it off, but even they started noticing things. Chris swore he saw someone standing at the edge of his driveway late one night, while Jasmine found an old torn photo tucked under her windshield wiper, showing the three of them in the alley, though they had never taken such a picture. Desperate for answers, they decided to investigate the alley in broad daylight, hoping to find something that would explain the strange occurrences. Armed with flashlights and uneasy banter, they ventured back. The alley looked the same as it always had, forgotten, abandoned. But as they moved deeper, Jasmine spotted something glinting on the ground. It was a key, rusty and worn, with initials etched into it. They had no idea what it opened, but it felt important. Following a hunch, Taylor suggested they search the abandoned hardware store adjacent to the alley. The building had been closed for years, ever since the owner disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Breaking in wasn't hard. The door was barely hanging on its hinges. Inside, dust blanketed everything, and the air smelled of mold and decay. In the back, they found a locked door, and with a glance at each other, Taylor used the key. Fit perfectly. The door creaked open, revealing a small hidden room. Inside were old newspapers, photographs, and a tattered journal. As they flipped through the pages, the pieces began to fall into place. The journal belonged to the store's owner, who had been investigating strange disappearances in the alley for years. He wrote of seeing figures in the shadows, hearing voices that weren't there, and finding cryptic notes just like the one Taylor had found. The last entry was dated the day he vanished. Fear gripped them, but they pressed on, knowing they were in too deep to turn back. Jasmine found another note tucked in the back of the journal. Once you see them, they see you. It was clear now they weren't dealing with something ordinary. Whatever haunted that alley had been there for years, and now it had latched onto them. The more they tried to escape it, the closer it seemed to get, as if the alley itself was drawing them back. Over the following weeks, their lives unraveled. Taylor barely slept, haunted by figures standing at the foot of his bed. Chris started seeing things in mirrors, dark silhouettes that vanished when he turned. Jasmine became withdrawn, convinced that something was watching her every move. The three of them tried to stick together, but the distance grew, the fear isolating them in their own worlds. They had unleashed something, and it wasn't going to let them go. One night, unable to bear it any longer, they returned to the alley. There was no plan, no strategy, just a desperate need for answers or an end. As they stepped into the shadows, the alley seemed to breathe, the air thick with tension. Figures emerged from the darkness, silent and still, just as they had always been. But this time they weren't going to disappear. Taylor, Chris, and Jasmine realized the truth too late. The alley wasn't just haunted. It was waiting, and they had finally come home.